1, 2, 3.
My son and I played a lot of hide and seek back when he was around 5, though it was hide and seek with some rules bent to fit him, since he was still at that age where the actual concept confused him a little. I was the only one who ever hid. He refused every single time I tried to get him to, usually just standing there shaking his head with his arms crossed until I gave up asking. And because a 5-year-old genuinely cannot find anybody on his own, not really, I had to call out every so often, some silly little phrase, so he had something to follow through the house. 5-year-olds are not exactly known for their strategic thinking, in case that needs saying. He would wander in the completely wrong direction half the time, checking the same room twice, forgetting entirely what he was even looking for if a toy caught his eye along the way. We had just moved into that house a few weeks earlier, and money was tight enough that most of our furniture came from a second-hand site, mismatched chairs and a couch with a stain on one arm I never quite got out. Dinner most nights was whatever stretched furthest, usually rice and beans in some form or another, sometimes with a little chicken if the week had gone well. I was still driving the same car I had in college, a sedan with over 160,000 miles on it that made a sound on cold mornings I had learned to just ignore. None of that really mattered to my son, though. He did not care about any of it, just wanted somebody to hide so he could go find them, over and over, as many times as I would let him. If he found me, the rule was I had to go hide again right away, no breaks, which usually wore me out faster than it wore him out. That night I told him it was already past bedtime and we needed to stop, that we had played enough rounds already, but he begged for one more. The way kids do when they know exactly which face gets them what they want. Bottom lip out, eyes wide, and I gave in like I always did. I told him to go count by the front door, since that was far enough from most of the house that I would have time to actually get somewhere good. He took off running, sock feet sliding a little on the hardwood, and I heard him start counting out loud. 1, 2, in that careful, deliberate way little kids count when they are trying hard to do it right, as I moved fast through the living room, scanning for a spot before he got too far along. The hall closet was right there, half open already from earlier that day, coats and old jackets crammed in from the move that we had not fully sorted through yet, still smelling faintly like the boxes they had traveled in. I climbed in, squeezed between all that scratchy fabric, elbow catching on a wire hanger that I had to quietly untangle myself from, and pulled the door most of the way shut behind me. Tight fit, but worth it, because the better the hiding spot, the longer I usually got before he tracked me down. I pulled my phone out and started scrolling through nothing in particular while I waited. The small light from the screen, the only thing illuminating the cramped space around me. I could hear his footsteps somewhere near the kitchen after a minute, muffled through the door, moving around without any real direction, occasionally bumping into something with a soft thud followed by a giggle. I waited a bit longer, and when he did not seem to be heading toward me, I cracked the closet door open enough to call out our little phrase, something dumb I had made up on the spot the first time we ever played this game together. Warmer, warmer, but not quite. His footsteps picked up after that, getting louder, closer, along with those little giggles he always did when he thought he was close to finding me, that particular breathless excitement only little kids seem to have access to. Then, out of nowhere, they turned and started heading up the stairs instead. Thump, 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 small feet working hard against each step. I almost laughed. Wrong direction entirely. I cracked the door open a bit further just in time to catch his little feet disappearing up onto the landing, striped socks and all, and then I just shrugged and pulled the door most of the way shut again. Phone back out. More time to myself, apparently, which honestly felt like a small win after a long day. "Mommy," I heard him call from somewhere upstairs, that sing-song voice he always used during the game, drawn out and playful. "Mommy, where are you?" I smiled to myself, sitting in that closet, scrolling through something meaningless on my phone. Whoever invented hide and seek probably had a kid of their own, because there is no better setup than one where your child is occupied and quiet and thinks he's the one having all the fun, while you get 5 uninterrupted minutes to yourself for the first time all day. Then, from upstairs, I heard the phrase again. Warmer, warmer, but not quite. I went completely still. Every part of me locked up at once, because I had not said that. I was sitting in the closet, silent, phone in my hand, screen still glowing faintly against my palm, and yet that phrase had come from somewhere upstairs, in a voice soft enough and close enough to sound almost like mine, but it was not me. It had the same rhythm I always used, the same slight rise at the end, close enough that for half a second my brain tried to convince me I had said it without realizing. My son and I were the only 2 people in that house. I knew that with total certainty. I had locked the front door myself, not 20 minutes earlier. I shoved the closet door open and bolted out, phone clattering to the floor somewhere behind me. Forgotten. "Where are you?" I shouted, already moving toward the stairs, my heart pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my ears. I heard his footsteps running above me, that same giggling trailing down through the ceiling, light and carefree, completely unaware of anything being wrong. My legs felt frozen for a second even as I was already moving, that strange disconnect between what your body knows it needs to do and how slow it feels to actually do it. "Where are you?" I screamed again, louder this time, taking the stairs 2 at a time, one hand dragging along the railing to keep my balance. More giggling answered me, and then his voice, delighted, completely unaware. "Found your feet, Mommy." I threw open his bedroom door first, so hard it banged against the wall behind it. Empty. His bed still made from that morning. Stuffed animals lined up along the pillow exactly how we always left them. Nothing disturbed, nothing out of place. I spun back into the hallway, calling his name again, and got nothing back. No footsteps, no giggling. The whole house had gone dead silent in a way that felt worse than any of the noise before it. A silence that felt like it was pressing against my ears. I checked the guest room next, threw open the closet in there too. Coats and old boxes we had not unpacked yet, nothing. Ran back into the hallway, into my own bedroom last, since it was the only room left, flipped the light on so fast I nearly knocked the switch off its plate, empty as well. The laundry basket sat exactly where I had left it that morning, overflowing slightly onto the floor beside it. My closet door was hanging open, clothes still on their hangers, undisturbed. I checked around the far side of the bed. Nothing. Dropped to my knees and looked underneath, breath catching in my throat the whole time. Nothing there either. "Mommy?" The relief that hit me when I heard that voice again nearly buckled my knees entirely. It came from the bathroom, the door cracked open just slightly, one small eye peeking out at me through the gap, wide and scared in a way I had never once seen on his face before, not even during thunderstorms, not even during his worst nightmares. I ran over and pulled him into my arms, held him tight enough that he squirmed a little against my grip, then picked him up fully to carry him out of there, his small arms wrapping around my neck automatically. That is when I noticed his eyes were not looking at me at all. They were fixed on something just past my shoulder, still wide, still frightened, unmoving. I turned around slowly, every instinct in me screaming not to. It took a second for my brain to actually process what I was looking at, but once it did, I could not move at all. Tucked in the shadows of my own closet, just barely visible beneath the hems of my hanging dresses and coats, were 2 bare feet, standing perfectly still, toes pointed toward me, not shifting even slightly. I did not think through what to do next. There was no time for thinking, no time to weigh options the way you might in a calmer moment. The smart move, looking back on it now, would have been locking us both in that bathroom and climbing out through the window onto the porch roof below, which I knew from experience could hold my weight easily. Instead, I just ran, straight for the hallway, my son gripped tight against my chest, his face pressed into my shoulder, moving faster than I think I have ever moved in my entire life. As I hit the stairs, I heard footsteps behind us, slow, deliberate, heavy enough that I could feel the vibration of each step through the floor beneath my own feet as I ran. Completely different from the light, quick footsteps I had heard following my son earlier. I did not look back. Not once. Not even at the front door. I got us out into the yard, cold night air hitting both of us at once, and ran across to my neighbor's porch, pounding on the door with my free hand and screaming until the porch light finally flicked on and the door swung open. The police arrived within a few minutes, 2 patrol cars pulling up with lights flashing silently against the front of the house. They went through the entire property room by room, checked every closet, every crawl space, the small attic access panel at the end of the hallway, even the space behind the water heater in the basement. They found nothing. No sign of forced entry anywhere, no broken window, no tampered lock, no footprints in the flower beds beneath any of the windows, nothing at all to explain how anyone could have gotten in or out of that house without either of us seeing them at any point that night. I was around 15 the summer this happened, and every year my little sister and I spent a few weeks at our grandmother's place once school let out. It was just something our family did. Nobody ever had to plan it. My dad would drop us off, and that was that. Her place was an old farmhouse out past the edge of town, enough land around it that the nearest neighbors were still close enough to walk to, but far enough that nobody was checking in on each other every 5 minutes. We looked forward to it every summer. No early mornings, no rules about food, and a handful of kids from the neighboring properties we only really saw during those visits, but who felt like real friends anyway from how many summers we had put in together. This one afternoon, our grandmother went into town for some household supplies, and what should have been a quick trip ended up taking way longer than it needed to. Word got around fast that we were back, the way it always did out there, and a group of the neighborhood kids showed up not long after she left, same as they always did. We had brought some board games with us that trip, but not everybody knew how to play them, so after a little back and forth, somebody threw out hide and seek instead. Since it was one of those games every single kid already knew how to play no matter what age they were. Made sense too, considering where we were. Barn, old equipment shed, tall grass along the back fence, a little patch of trees on one side of the yard, plenty of good spots. One of the older boys got picked to be seeker first. He leaned up against the porch post, closed his eyes, and started counting loud enough for the rest of us to hear from wherever we were running off to. I remember taking off toward the side of the barn with my sister right on my heels, both of us laughing under our breath, not because anything was actually funny, just that kind of excitement you get running around at that age. It was getting on toward evening by then, sky starting to go that orange and purple color right before full dark, which made hiding trickier than earlier in the day since the shadows were stretching out long across the yard. Harder to tell what was a kid crouched down somewhere and what was just a weird shadow off a fence post or a stack of hay. The seeker started making his rounds, calling out names as he found people, all the usual chatter and laughing you get during that kind of game. My sister and I had wedged ourselves behind some stacked crates near the barn, close enough that we could hear each kid get found and head back toward the porch, their voices carrying easy in the quiet evening air. Bit by bit, everybody got found. I remember doing the math in my head, roughly how many kids had come over that afternoon, and by the time he had worked his way around most of the property, it sounded like everybody was accounted for except me and my sister, still tucked behind those crates waiting on him. Then he went quiet longer than normal. Not the usual little pause between finding somebody and heading off to look for the next kid. Actually quiet. And when he finally spoke again, his voice had changed. Dropped lower, not playful anymore like it had been the whole rest of the game. He said there was somebody behind the shed. My sister and I looked at each other, confused, because as far as either of us knew, every single kid who came over that day had already been found and was standing around near the porch by that point. We stayed low behind the crates a second longer, trying to hear what was going on, and I could hear the other kids' voices picking up too, that same nervous, confused tone in how they were all asking each other who he was even talking about. Curiosity beat out caution eventually, and my sister and I crept out from behind those crates and made our way toward the back of the property where everybody else was gathering by the shed. What I saw when we got there is something that still comes back to me every time this whole thing gets brought up. There was a grown man crouched down behind that shed, completely still, facing away from all of us toward the back fence, tucked into that narrow gap between the shed wall and a row of overgrown bushes, exactly the kind of spot a kid would pick during the game. Nobody knew him. Not one of the neighborhood parents, not anybody who had ever shown up during any of our summers there, not a face any of the local kids recognized either, from the way they were all whispering back and forth trying to place him. The seeker called out to him, the same way you naturally would if you thought you had just found the last hiding player, something like asking what he thought he was doing back there. Nothing happened for a second. He stayed exactly as still as before, not answering, not moving, just frozen in that crouch facing the fence. Then, slow, he started turning around. I could not tell you what his face actually looked like once he turned all the way, because the second he started moving, every single one of us backed up at the same time without anybody saying a word first. That kind of fear that does not need a grown-up around to explain why it is happening. The kind kids just understand somewhere in their gut without thinking it through logically. Somebody in the group yelled for everybody to run, and we all took off at once. A whole scattered pack of kids sprinting across the yard toward the porch, nobody looking back to check if he was coming after us. We got inside, locked the door, everybody breathing hard, a couple of the younger kids already crying from all the adrenaline. Only a few minutes after that, our grandmother pulled back into the driveway with her groceries. No clue at all what had just happened while she was gone. We all told her at once, talking over each other, trying to explain what we saw, and she got the sheriff's office on the phone right away, describing the man as best as a house full of panicked kids could manage between us. Did not take long for a deputy to show up, and after searching around the shed and the tree line behind it, they found signs somebody had been camping out in that patch of woods for what looked like a few days already, judging by the small amount of stuff and trash tucked away under some brush not far from where we had all been playing. It came out over the next couple weeks, through whatever our grandmother pieced together from neighbors and whatever little the sheriff's office would tell a house full of worried parents, that the man had actually been camped out along the edge of that property watching the kids in the area for a while before that afternoon, and that he had a record from another state, something involving kids, that none of the local families had any way of knowing about beforehand. They caught him a few days later at a gas station about 20 miles out, recognized off the description that deputy had radioed in that same night. I still do not know what would have happened if that seeker had not called out and spotted him behind the shed before my sister and I made our way over there, or what exactly the man had been planning once the game wrapped up and kids started heading home one by one that evening. This happened a few months back. My cousins and I used to play hide and seek in my bedroom pretty often, since it was bigger than most of the other rooms in the house and had enough furniture and corners to actually make hiding interesting. We always played with the lights off too, which made it more fun somehow, even though it also made it harder to actually find each other most of the time. One evening, my parents had gone out for the night, leaving me home with my cousins, 5 of us total, and after a while of just sitting around doing nothing, somebody suggested we take the game beyond just my bedroom this time and play through the whole house instead. Lights off, same as always. Everybody was immediately on board, since we had gotten a little bored of the same room every single time. My house was not particularly big. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a living room that opened straight into the kitchen without any real wall separating the two, just an archway. Small enough that hiding spots were limited, but that almost made it more exciting, trying to squeeze into places nobody would expect. I ended up hiding by myself in the kitchen, while one of my cousins counted somewhere back in my bedroom. I remember being fairly confident I was alone in there, since I could hear the rest of my cousins whispering to each other from the living room just on the other side of that archway, their voices low but still carrying in the quiet house. I climbed into the lower kitchen cupboard first, folding myself in as best I could, and stayed there a good while. It was the middle of summer, humid enough that within a few minutes I was sweating badly inside that cramped space, shirt sticking to my back. So eventually I gave up on that spot and crept out, moving instead to hide under the kitchen table, figuring the tablecloth hanging over the edges would cover me well enough. I sat under there, fanning myself with my hand, trying to cool off a little, when I noticed something. There was someone else already under that table with me. I was not scared at first. My immediate assumption was that it was one of my cousins, since it made sense that somebody else might have picked the same spot without either of us realizing the other was already there. I reached over and patted what I assumed was his back, since something about the shape and size made me think it was probably one of my male cousins rather than one of the girls. He did not move, did not turn around, did not react at all to me touching him, which struck me as a little odd, but not alarming, since staying dead still and quiet was basically the whole point of the game we were playing. What I did notice, even in that brief moment of contact, was how cold he felt under my hand, colder than made sense for someone who had presumably been sitting inside a warm house on a hot summer night, same as the rest of us. I did not think much more of it right then. It was pretty normal for us not to talk to each other while hiding, since talking basically gave your position away immediately. So I just stayed where I was, sitting quietly next to whoever this was, waiting for someone to eventually flip the lights back on and end the round. Eventually the lights did come on, all at once, bright enough that I flinched and had to squint hard for a second while my eyes adjusted. When I could finally see properly again and looked over to where my cousin should have been sitting right beside me, there was nobody there. I sat there for a second just confused, looking around under the table like maybe I had somehow misjudged where exactly he had been sitting, but there was nowhere for him to have gone. The space under that table was small, barely enough room for 2 people to fit in the first place, and the only way out was crawling from underneath it directly into the open kitchen, which meant I would have seen him leave, would have heard him moving, especially in a room that quiet. The lights had only been off to on for maybe 2 seconds at most, between me flinching and actually opening my eyes again. Nobody moves that fast. Nobody gets out from under a table and clears an entire room in 2 seconds without making a sound or brushing past you on the way out. A moment later, my actual cousins came into the kitchen looking for me, since the round had officially ended once the lights came back on. I remember looking between all of them standing there in the doorway, doing a quick head count and realizing every single one of them was already accounted for, right there in front of me. None of them had been the one under that table with me. That night, once everyone had gone home and I was getting ready for bed, I called each of my cousins individually, just to ask if any of them had been hiding under the kitchen table with me at any point during that round. Every single one of them gave me the same answer: no. None of them had gone anywhere near that table the entire game. I did not think about it too much after that, or at least I told myself I was not thinking about it, the way you do when something does not have an explanation you are willing to sit with for too long. I went back to normal life, back to school, back to the usual routine, and the memory of that night mostly faded into the background over the following weeks. About a month later, I was sitting at my reading table in my bedroom one evening, going through some homework with my desk lamp on, the rest of the room dim since it was already dark outside and I had not bothered turning on the overhead light. I remember being fully focused on what I was reading, not thinking about anything from that night in the kitchen at all, when I felt the temperature around me drop, subtle at first, the kind of thing you might normally write off as a draft from a window somewhere, except my window was closed. I remember checking, glancing over my shoulder toward it without really thinking, more out of instinct than any real suspicion yet. Then I felt it. A hand, resting lightly on my shoulder from behind, exactly the same way I had reached out and touched whoever had been under that kitchen table a month earlier. Cold, the same specific cold I remembered from that night, cold enough that it did not feel like it belonged to a living hand at all. I froze completely, pen still in my hand, staring straight ahead at my textbook without daring to turn around. My whole body suddenly rigid in a way that felt separate from any decision I was making. I could hear my own breathing, too loud in the quiet room, and I sat there for what felt like a long time, though it was probably only a few seconds, working up whatever nerve I had left to actually look behind me. When I finally did turn around, there was nothing there. My chair was pushed slightly further from the desk than I remembered leaving it, though I could not be entirely sure of that either, given how rattled I already was. The room was empty otherwise, door still closed the way I had left it, nothing disturbed anywhere else that I could see. I did not tell my parents what happened that night, mostly because I was not sure how to explain it in a way that would not just sound like I had fallen asleep at my desk and dreamed the whole thing.